You are about to hear the reality of the many untold or hidden things that have taken place in this world we live in. The truth of these things are now springing forth as a flood, as if a levee of knowledge has broken free. If you are a person who despises the truth, enjoys your delusion, and rejects knowledge, please keep it moving and don't bother to waste your time with this video. Because what you are about to hear will cause you to rethink everything you thought you knew. It will challenge your mind to the very edge of consciousness. So if you are not used to positive brain activity that may stimulate thought and change, get up, cut the video off, and continue grazing in the grass as a lost sheep. Watch your television to keep your mind weak. Drink the Kool-Aid of darkness and go back to sleep. Shalom. As young Elijah embarks on his research, he will soon discover that everything he thought he knew about his history was all wrong.
The cover-up of the accomplishments of black people. Chancellor Williams wrote a book called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And in this book he outlines 7 points as to why he feels that there was a cover-up.
Ignore. Just refuse to publish any facts of African history that don't go along with our racial theories.
We need to create a religious and a scientific doctrine so that African slavery won't appear that bad after all.
What we need to do is flood the world with new African histories that contain our European perspectives only.
Start renaming people and places. Replace African names with Arabic and European names. This will disguise their true black identity.
Let's change the criteria for defining race. For example, 1 drop of Negro blood in America makes you a Negro, no matter how light the skin.
Yes, when reporting ancient African history, reverse the standard. No matter how dark the skin, woolly the hair, or thick the lips, you don't have to be a Negro.
When black contribution to civilization is too obvious, let's find a way to attribute it to outside white influences.
When all the ancient historians contradict your theory, we'll just discredit them.
Young Elijah has just discovered that a cover-up of history is not only possible, but conceivable. There has been a conscious effort to wipe out the history of black people in this world.
What we need to do is flood the world with new African histories that contain our European perspectives only. What we need to do is flood the world, flood the world, flood the world.
Just over 100 years ago, a wandering prospector, a German by origin called Karl Mauch, searching for gold, came through these remote hills on a long trail and stumbled on this. He was the first white man ever to see it. And what he found, though he didn't know, were the largest man-made structures in any part of old Africa south of the valley of the Nile. A stone-built city in the heart of Africa, and yet the white people who first saw it were so blinded by their prejudices that they could not believe the evidence of their own eyes. Rather than face the possibility that Africans might have a history of their own, they fabricated exotic explanations and imagined fantastic rites in honor of faraway monarchs.
The educational systems of the world have managed to convince the original peoples of the earth that they are nothing more than a worthless chance happening. You have those such as Jordan Maxwell, who claim that we are some sort of primitive being that was already here before God created them. Note the implication is that they were created by God and that we evolved. The favorite claim of many is that we evolved from apes, which helps them in stating in their constitution that we are only 3/5 human.
was the eminent writer and historian Thomas Carlyle. In 1849, Carlyle published an essay entitled Occasional Discourse on the Negro Question, in which he appealed for a return to some form of slavery. It was printed and reprinted in magazines across the world and helped transform the 19th century debate about race.
Carlyle's voice is a kind of prophetic voice, you know, which booms out from his study in Cheyne Walk in Chelsea, and he writes these, you know, extraordinarily powerful prophetic pieces which were read, you know, with gusto by Victorians, and I mean, one can imagine them all sitting around their fires reading the latest periodical that's come out with this flow of rhetoric. In this case, in the Occasional Discourse on the Negro Question, the flow of rhetoric is about the necessity for inequality. Inequality is the proper way to run a society. Those who know should rule those who don't know. Men should rule women, white people should rule black, educated people should rule the masses.
It is a common myth that the dark indigenous people of certain regions are no longer there. They are still in these lands, but are strategically kept out of the media to enhance the deception. Let's talk about how Europeans colonized the whole world and dominated over the indigenous in favor of their own desires.
The whitening of a culture has been going on for thousands of years. Usually, when a land is conquered by a foreign people, the entire look of the people changes over a period of years. The women of that land are raped or subjugated as sexual slaves to their new masters. Much of their original history changes and becomes corrupt or assumed by their conquerors. A good example of this is Australia. The indigenous people of the land were black aboriginals. But when the British came and the British took over the land, the aboriginals were killed and pushed into the desert lands.
In the empire that the missionaries and abolitionists set out to create, indigenous peoples would see their cultures destroyed and their religions eradicated. And yet all this seems almost benign when compared with the grim reality of what imperialism became. Because during the 19th century, their dream was gradually overwhelmed by another vision. One that claimed that the dark races could not be civilized and should instead be exterminated. The British set about building a new capital and settling the surrounding countryside, land that for millennia had been the prime hunting grounds of the Aboriginals. Out in these fields and pastures, far from the control of the authorities, the settlers were free to displace and abuse the Aboriginals.
From the 1820s, huge amount of Aboriginal land has been taken up. Huge amount of Aboriginal land has been taken up. Huge amount of Aboriginal land has been taken up. And there is this enormous struggle between Aboriginal people and whites. Of course, it's very hard to document a lot of the settler violence because they know that it is against the law to kill Aboriginal people. They are being told that Aboriginal people are British subjects, but they certainly reveal in their diaries and journals the desire to kill Aboriginal people.
What became known as the Black War was a hidden conflict. The landscape itself was the only witness. The British settlers killed any Aboriginals they encountered. Whole groups were massacred. Kidnapping and rape became commonplace.
The British then began to come up with strategic ways to breeding out the original people of the land.
Notice, if you will, the half-caste child. And there are ever-increasing numbers of them. Now, what is to happen to them? Are we to allow the creation of an unwanted third race? Should the coloureds be encouraged to go back to the black? Or should they be advanced to white status and be absorbed in the white population? Now, time and again I am asked by some white man, if I marry this coloured person, will our children be black? and as Chief Protector of Aborigines, it is my responsibility to accept or reject those marriages. Here is the answer. 3 generations. Half-blood grandmother, quadroon daughter, octoroon grandson. Now, as you can see, in the 3rd generation, or 3rd cross, no trace of native origin is apparent. The continuing infiltration of white blood finally stamps out the black color. The Aboriginal has simply been bred out. Bred out. Bred out.
They did not call themselves Aboriginals. This was the name given to them by the British. Colonization brings death to the original people of the land. Names change and history is erased. Before the British in 1803, there were an estimated 750,000 full-blooded Aboriginals. The last full-blooded Aboriginal was a woman named Truganini, who died in 1876. Another example of intentional breeding out of blacks is what occurred in Brazil.
When slavery was abolished, what did the white elite think about the legacy of African culture in Brazil?
What bothered them, or the biggest problem, was how to deal with the population of color. Various intellectuals believed for Brazil to become a civilized country, it had to have a process of whitening. For this reason, the government invested a great deal in European immigration to the country.
The Brazilian government paid for more than 4 million Europeans to migrate to Brazil. This was part of a process known as branqueamento, whitening. The government hoped that these new immigrants would outnumber the black people and breed with them, over time whitening the face of Brazil. Whitening the face of Brazil.
Whitening the face of Brazil.
Both its gene pool and its culture.
From then on, the government began to persecute practices that were seen as black, like candomblé and capoeira, trying to convince people that these practices were barbaric and that it was a civilizing act to stop them.
History is being changed all the time. And then the people that control things, what do? They suppress the truth by calling you a racist if you challenge their version of history. I find it amazing that in every continent, the indigenous people of the land are much darker than the people that reside in the land today. What most don't realize is that the original people are still in these lands, while the lighter carbon copy of these people are pushed to the forefront and the darker people are pushed in the shadows of the land.
History has left some very impressive proof and evidence of what has happened. However, there are those who have set out to cover up true history and replace it with deception to cause particular groups to be shown in a better light than what history has already played out. They've also set out to recast historical figures as a race or a culture that wasn't true to real history. Much of our history has been whitewashed to portray the white race as always being on top. And we know that this is widely not true.